Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of The Snake Pit. I'm your host, Son of Bat, and tonight I'll be talking about Wonderland. Wonderland is a 2003 American crime thriller film and is based off the real-life Wonderland murders that happened in 1981. More specifically, in the Laurel Canyon section of Los Angeles. I always found this case really interesting because it is the second mass murder to happen in Laurel Canyon and the second worst mass murder in the history of Los Angeles, or at least the second worst mass murder involving somewhat famous people. The first being the Manson murders in 1969, and the big deal around that was Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger, Jay Sebring. All these people were young and up-and-coming people in Hollywood in various facets. But what makes the Wonderland case interesting is that the two most famous people are the person who was robbed and the person who set up the robbery. The person who was robbed was Eddie Nash, who some say had ties to the Israeli mob. Some say he had government pull, but the fact of the matter is the guy owned a lot of titty bars, and he was doing really good in the adult club scene. And the person who set up the robbery with the Wonderland gang, which is John Holmes. For those of you who have been living under a rock all this time, those of you who are repressed, know nothing about the adult entertainment industry, John Holmes was the king of porn. This guy, he was getting paid $1,000 a scene, not even a movie, $1,000 a scene in the late 70s and early 80s. And this guy basically, he was living it. But by the 1980s, his destructive and addictive lifestyle started catching up to him. And by 1981, the man was smoking crack. He was a full-on cokehead, basehead. And both, like, the guy was fucking snorting fucking powder like fucking crazy, and he was smoking rocks like a fucking lunatic. Now what happened is this, like, a little history lesson here is pretty much John Holmes, when he was at the lowest of lows, he started conversing with the Wonderland gang. He started hanging out with them because they could get him coke, and he could kind of just be a celebrity, you know, around these people. Everyone knew John Holmes for having the monster cack, and he'd be at parties and he would just be getting paid in blow and shit, and like his ego would just be fed. So it was a perfect win for him to be with these people, because the industry at that point wanted nothing to do with him. He couldn't properly perform, really, and amongst other really fucked up things, he was dating an underage girl that he was abusing the shit out of. So the guy was a fucking monster at this point, so it would only make sense that he would hang with a bunch of degenerates. Now, this basically culminates in him trying to like prove his worth, because even though he's in this group and he's like famous, he's treated like shit. He's a fucking freak show oddity. Like, yeah, man, the 14-incher does good in the industry, but to, like, I guess all these people, he's just like a fucking sideshow freak, more or less. Like, they kind of just they just treat him like shit, and he's just a junkie, so you know what, he takes it and shit. And one day he decides, after, you know, trying to fence some guns with his boys to Eddie Nash refuses the gun deal, and he's like, no, they're gonna get traced back. He tells these guys, because they've had enough of him. He's been doing all their drugs and just being a fucking user, and he tells them, look, I can get you a score. He gives them Eddie Nash's address, and they bust in, fuck a whole bunch of shit up, take like fucking a lot of stuff. I don't have to take everything because this guy was super rich, but they took a lot of his drugs. I think it was like a lot of coke, some fucking really pure heroin, and a bunch of money and guns and shit, and they just looted the place. And what happened was this guy was an idiot, man. He was connected, so he knew immediately, almost immediately, who set this whole thing up. And he knew it was John, because John had been over being a fucking sketch case, basing with this guy for hours, days even, and he fucking needed the opportunity to leave the door open. So basically, they figured out it's John Holmes. They capture him, and they tell him, look, if you don't tell me right now who set me up, I'm gonna fucking kill everybody you know, including your fucking girlfriend, your first wife, your mother, father, everyone you know. They're gonna fucking die. So John Holmes fucking caved, and he sold them out. And nobody really knows exactly how it went down. No one knows if John Holmes committed any of the murders. No one knows how much of it he actually saw. But the gist of it is he gave the address for the Wonderland house. A squad went in with lead pipes and beat the shit out of everyone. Fucking murdered them. And it's fucking brutal. I believe the movie actually also used real like pictures and snippets from the police videotape when they fucking went in this scene, and it's fucking brutal. Like, it's so crazy. Like I was saying, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, this is an ensemble cast movie. It's directed and written by a guy, of course, had to be named James Cox. Also written by Captain Mounzer, Todd Samovitz, and D. Lorston Scott. Produced by Michael Passermick and Holly Wiersma. Starring Val Kilmer, Kate Bosworth, Lisa Kudrow, Josh Lucas, Dylan McDermott, Tim Blake Nelson, Christina Applegate, Eric Bogeson, Carrie Fisher, Frankie G, MC Gainey, Janine Garofalo, Ted Levine, Faison Love, and Natasha Gregson Wagner. That is just a few people. Funny little note here, Michael Pitt, a young Michael Pitt, was supposed to have a role in here that was cut out. Yeah, no, this movie is not Boogie Nights, people. For those of you who didn't know, for those of you who know about the golden age of pornography, know about John Holmes, know about all this shit, you'll know Boogie Nights. This movie is not Boogie Nights. Boogie Nights is a very, by comparison, very light version of the whole John Holmes story, or at least a good chunk of it. They leave out some of the really fucked up shit. But, like, Boogie Nights is a popcorn movie about the porn industry. It shows some pretty fucked up shit. It even shows the robbery of Eddie Nash, but it's depicted almost for laughs. Like, it's, for those of you who've seen it, it's the scene where Marky Mark, John C. Reilly, and fucking the Punisher, the guy from 2004, Thomas Jane, I think his name is, they're in the house, and there's this guy just fucking basing, and this little Filipino kid in a Speedo lighting firecrackers, and they rob the fucking place. That's pretty much this movie. However, this movie is just so much more. It's fucking crazy. It's told from a non-linear perspective. So unlike Boogie Nights that goes through like the 70s up until the very early 80s, this just covers 81. It covers before, leading up, and slightly after the Wonderland murders and the chaos that engulfed it. It's told from multiple perspectives, so you get different people's ideas of what went on. Val Kilmer plays John Holmes in this. He killed it. He did really good. I think this is one of the last performances he gave before he got really sick with cancer, which fucking sucks, but he really killed it in this role. He was great as John Holmes. Mark Wahlberg did a good job too as Dirk Diggler, but I don't know, man. Like, I always preferred Wonderland over Boogie Nights because Wonderland is the true story. And if you watch the Killing of America video, you saw me go on that rant about how fact is always great in, like, these true crime cases or documentaries. This isn't a documentary. This is a true crime story, but I believe this is one of the best ones. It has so much, like, that could appeal to somebody, if you're interested in, like, the golden era of porn or the fall of the golden era of porn. John Holmes, if you saw Boogie Nights and you want to see the true story, there's that. If you're into crime thrillers, this is a great one. It's got so many elements to, like, just draw you in that, like, it's just a fascinating story. And like I said, Val Kilmer was great, but all these other guys in here were fucking crazy. Like, more specifically, some of the Wonderland gang, like Dylan McDermott fucking killed it as David Lind. Josh Lucas was fucking hilarious. This guy was fucked. He played this guy named Ron Lanius, or Lannis, and that's one of the coke dealers in the Wonderland gang. But, like, everyone just did so good in this fucking movie. Like, it was great. The DVD released by Lionsgate Films is fucking amazing. This is the 2-disc limited edition that I am covering from, I believe, 2003. It was made for $5.5 million, but it actually only made $2.4. So this is technically a bomb. But I don't know how. Maybe it's because the subject matter, it doesn't appeal to, like, a mainstream viewer. I mean, even if you think about that movie Middlemen, for example, like, that movie is fucking amazing. Like, it's a great comedy movie. It kind of covers the same waters. A little lighter, kind of like Boogie Nights. But again, nobody talks about it. And I think whenever you make a movie, a mainstream movie that deals with porn stars, pornography, whatever you want to call it, you get a lot of red tape and a lot of people that don't want to fucking advertise such things. And it's, like, really a shame because it is a part of our society. It's a part of history. Like, especially for those of you who are into, like, extreme cinema, horror cinema, like, porn was playing with the fucking kung fu movies, with the horror movies, the action movies. It is just as big a staple as those other ones. And I don't think that just because there's a movie being made about that subject, it automatically fits into that subject and should be treated as such. This movie was a great crime film. I don't know about Boogie Nights, like, I'm not too big into the history, but I don't know if it had that kind of reaction. But from my recollection, like, everybody fucking loves it. I mean, even when I was in fucking high school, for some reason, our 9th grade film teacher was showing us this fucking movie, Boogie Nights, and, like, weird, but like, yeah, it's like well renowned now, I guess. But I don't know, did it have that reaction when it came out? I don't know. I just find anytime you make a movie that kind of dwells in these parts, it's either going to be put into the realms of obscurity straight to DVD, or it's going to bomb like this one, which I don't think is fair. This was a really good movie about a very taboo subject not a lot of people want to talk about, but sometimes, you know, you need to talk about these things, right? Like, you know, some things need to be made for an adult audience, and that's fine. This movie is dark, though, man. Like, it is very dark. Like, this is 1981 John Holmes. This is him fucking underage girls and smoking crack. Like, this is just, he's not a glorified character. Like, the thing about John Holmes, the mythology behind him is he was like the everyman, but he had an extraordinarily large dick, right? Like, he was the guy every guy dreams of being, right? You know, that's why, like, he was such a big star. But by the time his career fizzled and he became a huge drug addict, his ego got so fucking big. And they don't know this. Like, they don't know if he was already like this and the drugs brought it out, but he was a fucking sociopath. Like, he was not a good person toward the end. And I mean, the argument can be made it was his lifestyle that turned him this way. The excess, the ego, we don't simply know. The guy just wasn't good, you know? Like, he was a legend in the adult film industry, but he burned a lot of bridges and he did a lot of fucked up shit. And I'll get more into that later on the special features of this podcast, but more into Wonderland. So basically, we get 1981 John Holmes, and he's a total piece of shit. He's with his girlfriend, Dawn, occasionally seeing his first wife, who kind of doesn't really want anything to do with him, but she still stays in contact. And he's long out of the porn industry because he can't maintain a hard-on from all the blow he's fucking doing. And he's just, you know, going around with his 15-year-old girlfriend trying to, like, score drugs and shit, even pimping her out to people like Eddie Nash and shit, which is just so fucked up. Like, this movie's filled with scenes of him manipulating this girl and just being a fucking monster, and then turning on that John Holmes charm, where apparently he had like a boyish charm to him and he was a very nice guy, and he would turn that on and he would trick this poor girl time and time again into just following him down his spiral. And then we meet the Wonderland gang, and these guys are, like I was saying, these guys are all fucking degenerate lunatics, but like they were all played great. There's like it's basically the apartment is like, or house or whatever you want to call it, duplex, is like this giant party that never fucking ends, and it's just degenerates just doing drugs and just getting fucked and doing crazy shit. It's like a Motley Crue fucking like tour, like TVs going out of windows and shit. Like, it's just a mess. And yeah, like I was saying earlier, because I was spilling my guts about this movie, John Holmes is not developing the best relationship with these people. He's kind of used as an oddity. He whips out his cock, shows people, and then, like, you know, he gets kind of just verbally abused and trashed around by everyone. Even one of the main guys, David, played by Dylan McDermott, he doesn't like John Holmes from the get-go. He can tell there's something about him, like his behavior is like snaky, and he knows, like, this guy's got something to him. Like he wouldn't be like he's just, there's something off about him, and he's right to be thinking so. This guy's a full-on junkie, and you know what they say, you can't fucking trust junkies, especially ones this deep in a spiral. Bad shit's bound to happen. Anyway, they need to get more money and more drugs, so John sets up the robbery, and then, like I said, Eddie Nash threatens him. He folds like a fucking paper cup, and out of fear that they'll kill his fucking underage girlfriend and his wife and his parents, he fucking lets these dudes go into the apartment and murder everyone, and it is fucking brutal. This movie's told from different perspectives, so you get a couple ideas of how the story plays out, but what's great is everyone who was involved in this was so strung out or so high or so fucked up or so adverse to talking to police, because whether it was the porn industry, drugs, like anything, like these people don't want to talk to police. So you have a lot of varying accounts of how this happened. So you never really get you like have the facts based off what the photos and evidence have shown, but we don't have a conclusive answer as to how everything went down. We have a bunch of unreliable narrators here. We have a bunch of people that are high as fuck. We have a bunch of people that don't want to save, you know, a longer sentence. And yeah, it becomes a great mystery. Like, it's very dark. It's a very I think it's a 2-hour movie, but, you know, it kind of flies by. It's a very good movie that, like, I feel like more people should fucking check out and talk about. Fucking even Paris Hilton's in this movie. That's how you know this shit is so early 2000s. Like, I fucking totally forgot about it, but yeah, she's in it. There's like I think reading about it too, like fucking Val Kilmer and Josh Lucas spent a night in the Wonderland house on the anniversary murders, which is fucking wild. That harkens back to the idea of like Trent Reznor, recording the Downward Spiral in the fucking Manson murder house, or like I think even Marilyn Manson did some of that shit, but it's fucking crazy. They even included the actual police investigation tape as part of the special features on the DVD, which is crazy. And this is also, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, this is the first time an actual murder case was broadcast via VHS tape in a courtroom. So that's pretty interesting. The tape itself is like really fucked up. Like, I mean, if you've seen death footage, live leak, shockumentaries, any of that stuff, you've seen a dead body, it may not be, too bad for you, but like, it'd be pretty heavy for someone who's not used to that. You see it all. You see these people like bludgeoned in their beds. I think only one survived. Like Dylan McDermott's character wasn't there the night of the murders. He was conveniently gone doing something, but I think it was his girlfriend that got fucked up. Like I think she's the only one that survived. Everyone else got bludgeoned so badly, but this chick got beaten so bad she turned into a vegetable. And so her testimony wasn't ultimately used, I don't think. And John Holmes was too scared to go testify against Nash, so he even refused to talk to the police too, in fear of what would happen. It just turned into a shitstorm. When the movie was playing, actually, the Toronto Film Festival, one of the promotional items that was handed out was a ruler that was 13.5 inches long. Going back to the John Holmes and the giant cack, the murder scene from John Holmes' perspective, there's several single frame shots of the actual corpses. So like I said, they hypercut shots of the actual murder tape into this. So whether you watch the tape or watch the movie, you're going to see it at some point, just at different speeds, and it might process in your brain differently. There is kind of a fuck up here where in the movie they depicted that after the robbery happens, John Holmes went to visit Eddie Nash, but this didn't happen. What actually happened was he was spotted on the street by some of Nash's associates in Hollywood, and they noticed he was wearing the jewelry he stole, and they told Nash, who in turn basically got the two gunmen to fucking cram one in the back of his head, and they're like, get in the fucking car, and then they took him back to Nash for questioning. But again, with these true crime movies, they kind of alternate certain events to make it more of a tight narrative, to make it go by faster. But from what I've checked, because there's a documentary on here on disc 2 called WAD, The Life and Times of John C. Holmes, and that pretty much corroborates a lot of what happened in here. And even Sharon Holmes, his first wife, and then his girlfriend, the underage girl Dawn, fucking, what was it? I think it was Dawn Schiller. They actually were consultants on the film. So the two women that knew John Holmes arguably the best were there to like corroborate everything that they knew happened. And even though he recanted to police and told them he knew nothing, and even though they found a partial print and they couldn't nail him for it, but the one person he did apparently admitted the whole thing to was his first wife. And she is adamant that he didn't kill anyone, but he was definitely there, and he was covered in blood when he came back to the home, and she washed him off and before he went on the run. A really wild fucking story. Really, like, just so crazy. A lot of players in here that are just so fucked in the head. Like, just drug addicts, prostitutes, like murderers, like I think one of them is a biker, porn stars, like fucking possible Israeli mobsters. Like it's so fucking crazy. Originally in 98 it was announced Michael Biehn was supposed to be John Holmes, which would have been wild. Fucking what was his name? Kyle Reese, basically, just like funny as shit. It's a wild one. It's definitely not one that you know what, fuck it, I could recommend this to a normal viewer. If you've seen normal crime movies, you could handle this. This is not like anything out of the ordinary. This is just an extraordinary tale about an extraordinary guy who got into some crazy shit. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do something completely different. We're doing a 2-part review. It hasn't been done on the channel, but I figured the subject matter fits, especially with movies like Erotic Nights, The Living Dead, Emmanuel in America, maybe even Forced Entry or Zodiac Rapist down the line. I might as well cover this documentary. It is the second disc on the Wonderland DVD. If you are lucky enough to get the special edition, they blessed you with this documentary from 1998 called WAD, The Life and Times of John C. Holmes. And right from the title, as you guessed, it's a documentary about John Holmes, the man in Wonderland, the inspiration for Dirk Diggler and Boogie Nights, and like I said earlier, the man every dude wishes they were at some point. John Holmes, from his highest of highs to his lowest of lows, this documentary has porn stars, directors, producers. Larry Flint, the creator of Hustler, even shows up at a certain point. Even the guy who directed Boogie Nights, I think Paul Thomas Anderson is in it. You got journalists, you got ex-wives, you got ex-girlfriends, just a whole roster of people to give you an idea of who John Holmes was. I won't give an entire rundown on it, but I do believe that this is another great documentary. Like The Killing of America, it was completely uncompromised. You had footage from two different perspectives. You had people who loved Holmes and people who absolutely despised him by the end, and it kind of just let you decide what you thought of him. And honestly, sometimes it felt bad for the guy. At other times, he did some deplorable shit that can't be forgiven. It runs at about 2 hours, so it's not a short documentary, but hey, you're doing something about John Holmes. You really expect it to be short. This stars people like Bunny Blue, Aunt Peg, Misty Dawn, Ron Jeremy, Don Fernando, Paul Thomas Anderson, the director I told you guys about, Sharon Mitchell, Annette Haven, Gloria Leonard, a whole bunch of people from the golden age of porn, a whole bunch of these directors and shit, like I said. And basically, the quick rundown is John Holmes was a country boy born in Ohio who realized after, growing up in a very shitty circumstance, he had a mother that walked out on him, an abusive alcoholic father, and grew up in poverty. He realized when he was older that he had an extraordinary gift. And without beating around the bush, because he's certainly beaten to plenty of bushes, sorry, enough of the shitty puns. This guy basically realized he had a 13-inch cock. And what did he do? He kind of didn't do anything about it. No, he joined the army to get away from his dad. He did everything a normal guy tried to do to get out of his situation and build a normal life. But then the 60s rolled around. The counterculture was over the horizon, and he moved to California. In moving to California, he met his first wife, who was a nurse. They got married after 5 months of knowing each other, as a lot of people did back in those days. And then one day, he was taking a piss beside somebody, and the guy looked down, saw his fucking tripod, and was like, hey man, let's do some shots, you make some money. And that's pretty much how it went. And a lot of the people who, the main guy who was his agent for his whole career basically said that when he first met him and they did shots, he was like, he wasn't a very extraordinary looking guy. He actually looked kind of frail, kind of ugly, like just normal, but obviously the fucking 13-inch, the fucking hoagie, bro. That's what got him the fucking jobs. And what followed was he was in a bunch of these films called Johnny Wad. And Johnny Wad was basically kind of like a PI, like private eye type fucking persona, where he had like these detective movies where he was just fucking chicks, right? But like he had like these little gunshot scenes in between kung fu and shit, and it's like, like even one of these women who worked, I think she was an actor turned director, she's talking about the key thing about making porn back in the golden age was like, could you cut out all the sex scenes and still have a cohesive watchable movie if you removed everything? And like, that's funny. Like, that's what I kind of like find enjoyable at the golden age of porn, is like people were just like getting high and having fun and just trying out this new thing. It was now a new thing for like sex to be on film, and people were talking about it without like these hang-ups and shit, and like people were just partying, man. The 70s was just a giant party, and John Holmes happened to be at the right place at the right time, and he quickly became the #1 male porn star ever, and I don't think anyone's been able to match him since in reputation or size. And it's just crazy that his name still is borderline household to this day. Like, people will know who that is if you talk about it. Yeah, no, the guy's a fucking legend, man. But he had a very dark streak to him, and he was a piece of shit. Like, I'm just gonna be flat out and say it. The guy was a piece of shit. He knew how to play people. And even in this documentary, early on, you get an idea of what was gonna happen later on. Like, early on in his career, I think what was going on is because a lot of the porn was made in Los Angeles, but where it did really big in terms of viewership was in New York City. Now, it was still technically illegal to make hardcore pornography, i.e. oral copulation or vaginal or anal penetration. You couldn't show that in a film up until then. I think even showing pubic hair would be an issue. I think they could only show tits. But, so yeah, you could face up to 3 years jail time for making a porn film. And what John Holmes would do, and this is kind of like key into his behavior later, like I said, is he would actually be an informant for the police and bust some of these films being made, screwing over his competition. So on one hand, you have this guy who basically made the porn industry what it is, while he was simultaneously fucking over other people because he wanted to be number one. And yeah, this shit built his ego up like crazy, and it only got worse from there out. The documentary is interesting because you'll have women that are like, I can't even tell half the time if they're scripting it or if they're being genuine, but some of them are like genuinely like, oh yeah, he was a good guy, reserved, like very like sensitive, like yada yada yada. But then you have women that are like, no, he was a monster, he didn't give a shit, he beat the shit out of people. So there's like almost like a Jekyll and Hyde with him, right? Which is really, it's not even the worst of it, but it gets worse. It gets way worse. Basically what happens is at the height of his career, he's doing like, it started with weed, then it was coke, then it was freebasing, and they tell a story about how this guy was basically like getting paid $1,000 a scene to fuck chicks, and now he was like, they couldn't find him on set, and when they did find him, he was in a closet all day smoking, like basing in the closet, or like when he would try to do scenes, he couldn't get it up. And he was a notorious liar too. Like every one of his agents and his close friends, like he had an issue with having people come close to him, so he was very distant from people, and whenever he did talk, he made up all these crazy outlandish lies. Like the number one lie, but it adds to the mythos, is that he fucked like 14,000 women. Now a lot of people argue that it's physically impossible and that it's more likely closer to about 800 or 1,000, but the argument gets made that it ruins the mystique and people like their fantasies, yada yada yada. So for the sake of argument, we'll say he fucked 14,000 chicks, and he had the ego of a guy that fucked 14,000 chicks. I don't know what to say. The guy was going through fucking bags of blow. Like, there's pictures in this documentary of him just with, like, bags everywhere and shit. And it's just crazy. And you have, like, this dichotomy of people who are like, oh, yeah, great guy, great to work with. Yeah, he was a bit of a liar. Yeah, he did drugs a little bit too much. And then it starts leaning into a more darker aspect. Like, it kind of pulls the Boogie Nights. The first half is all parties and good times, sunshine, rainbows, everyone's getting their dick sucked and busting a nut. And then it starts slipping closer and closer to the 80s. Crack comes in. The roles aren't coming in as much. Videotape came along. The budgets start getting smaller. He used to be making about 1,000 for a fucking scene. He's making about 300. But that's just the porn perspective. You also got to add in the fact that Wonderland happened in 81. Now, by 81, he couldn't maintain stiffness, to say the least, and he had a short temper, and he was burning all of his bridges, so he wasn't working in porn. Then he shacked up with the fucking Wonderland gang. Bunch of other degenerates. They all fed off each other, resulted into the second biggest mass murder in Los Angeles, and he went on the run. He went on the run with his underage girlfriend, and he made his way all the way to Florida, where for a brief moment in time, the further away they got from California and the drugs, the better he got and the more back to his normal self he was. But that quickly changed when they ran out of money. By the time they're in fucking Mississippi on their way to Florida, he was prostituting her again to get money and beating her and treating her like a bag of shit. And it's crazy to think, they even bring it up in the documentary, like, it's crazy that John Holmes took this 15-year-old girl who at the time like had not had sex with anybody, and he basically stole her virginity in a van, and now she was following him to the ends of the earth in this fucking crack-fueled fucking odyssey of murder, mayhem, and fucking porn. Like, it's crazy how you can go from being the king to a complete degenerate in such a short time period. And it's like, some people have addictive personalities and some people can't handle excess. John Holmes was definitely someone who couldn't handle it, because it fucking destroyed him. The story only proceeds to get darker and darker. He got found when he was in Florida because his girl basically snitched on him, put an end to the abuse and everything. He got picked up. Well, actually no, she didn't snitch on him. I my bad. I remember that incorrectly. There was a lot going on. I watched the movie and the documentary. What happened was there was an argument at a poolside, and he beat the shit out of her in front of a bunch of people. And yeah, he got caught and he went to jail, and when he got out, he like I said, he burned a lot of bridges. It was harder finding work and shit, you know, like So I think how the story goes, he ended up doing a couple gay pictures, and that pretty much fucked him. Like that blacklisted him for any other careers, because obvious stigmas about homosexuality. That wasn't even his thing. He wasn't gay. He just gay for pay, man. Crackhead will do anything, I guess. I don't fucking know. But yeah, he did some of that shit, and that fucked his U.S. reputation. So what happened was he flew over to Italy with the thing with this woman Cisolina, I think, and he was doing a porno with her. Now, what makes this really fucked up is at this point he had full-blown AIDS, and he wasn't telling anybody. People knew he looked sick. People knew he looked like shit, but he basically just was dying, and he didn't tell anyone. He told everyone that he had colon cancer, and was really fucked up. I mean, like, and this isn't even an excuse. Like, he was a rat. He ratted on his fucking druggy friends, got them killed, accomplice to murder. He abused his fucking girlfriend. She was an underage girl. He robbed the innocence of a child. And now he was spreading AIDS to the industry that he helped create. And from what his first wife said, basically, he was, in his mind, he was doing it to get back at these people, because he never saw them as friends. He saw them as scum, and he was using them. He stole from them. He stole drugs from them, cigarettes, like everything. And now this was his way to get back at them. Apparently, his agent also said when he got the original diagnosis, the doctors told him, like, look, you got to cut out the drugs. You got to cut out fucking all these people. Take some vitamins, and you can maybe live another 10, 15 years. But instantly, it flew over his head, and he drank double. Guy was doing like 50 Valiums a day. Like, he did double of everything into excess, and he pushed himself further into an early grave. But it's inexcusable that he was fucking people without protection, not even telling people about his AIDS status. Nobody that I know got infected. There's a rumor that went around that his quote-unquote gay lover, because there's a lot of rumors going around about him at the time, was someone who had it and died, but there's no clarification on that. No one on the Italian films he did contracted AIDS and had died, thankfully. I think Amber Lynn was in there, which she is an OG actress. Would have sucked if she got AIDS. But yeah, man, guy did some really scummy shit in the later end of his life. He snitched a bunch of people. He had people basically murdered because of his addictions. And the other thing that comes up too is his second wife. And honestly, the only other person about as unlikable as how John becomes at the end is his second wife. And I couldn't tell I couldn't pin it if she was a gold digger or a drug addict. But I remember she was like the queen of butts or some shit in the 80s. And she became Mrs. John Holmes II, also known as Misty Dawn, who her original name was not that it matters, Laurie Holmes, also known as Laurie Gardner, I believe, or Laurie Rose. Anyway, this chick, she was terrible in the documentary. She says like all these things, and basically everyone else in the documentary, even the people that were like not friends with each other, can confirm that everything she's saying is a fabrication, a fairy tale, or bullshit. Saying their marriage was happy and perfect. It wasn't. He was abusive. She distanced him from everybody, especially when he had AIDS and when he was dying. He pretty much died alone. All the people he worked with in the 70s and stuff that wanted to see him while he was in hospital couldn't happen, wouldn't let them see it. And the guy, he was a bright star shining bright. He burned out really fast, and he fucking died in the gutter with AIDS. I guess on some level that's karmatic justice for just abusing the gift that God gave you, man. Maybe this is like John Holmes' story that no man should have a fucking 13-inch cock. It's too much power. Because this guy, this is the thing I don't get too, because Ron Jeremy showed up in the documentary, and it's like, how can these guys who are making all this money get to like bang some of the hottest fucking porn stars ever? How do they still manage to just, it's not enough, and they have to rape people, they have to fuck children, and they have to be involved with murderers? Like, I don't understand that. Like, that was the one thing too about this documentary that was weird, was when fucking the hedgehog fucking Ron Jeremy showed up, and he's like talking about how there's a special place in hell for John Holmes for possibly spreading AIDS, but it's like ironic because he also did some really vile shit to some of his actresses. And that's not a slam on the industry. There's some really, like I said, like the fucking Johnny Wad movies are fucking hilarious, man. Like some of the scenes in between, like the acting is so bad, but it's like B-movie level. Like it's hilarious. Like that golden era of porn definitely made some wild shit. yeah, it's just it's not for everyone, and I get that. You know, a lot of moralists and purists will hate it, but like it's definitely a very important part of American history, especially in the 70s and 80s. Like The Killing of America, this is a documentary that I feel should be seen by anyone who's into hard-hitting journalism, out there stories, crime stories, larger than life stories, and just unfiltered, uncensored truth. This documentary didn't feel edited. It just got all the information it got. It put it in a 2-hour thing, and it just gave it to you. And it was great. I fucking like Wonderland. These were just a great double feature to do. The movie Wonderland, I'd probably have to give that a perfect 10. It's one of my favorite crime movies of all time. Funny enough, it doesn't sit on the horror shelf, which I don't think it would make sense if it really did, because it's not really a horror movie. The murders are horrific and very violent. There are some very intense scenes in this movie, but it's not a horror film, which is weird because it's very conflicting for me, especially when across the way from the normal and crime movies, you got the horror movies like the Charles Manson ones and shit, and I'm like, oh, they should just be together, but they can't. The unholy alliance. But yeah, great true crime movie, very fucking brutal. Everyone who acted in it was fucking great. You will not be disappointed if you check it out. That's a perfect 10 for me, like a lot of the tits in the golden age of the 80s and 70s. And now I'm going to cut through the bush, and I'm going to fucking give a point system for WAD, The Life and Times of John C. Holmes. As a documentary, I'm going to have to give it about a 9.5. 9.5 solely because, I don't know, maybe I was a little burned out because I just watched the movie Wonderland, and I don't know if there's any replayability to it, you know what I mean? Like, you see this documentary, you get the whole story. I don't think you need to really see any other documentaries on John Holmes after you see this. I think this is the definitive. I think if you collect, porno films, this is a documentary you should have with your collection for as like a history piece or whatever, as like a talking point with people, whatever the fuck you do. If you get the Wonderland 2-disc edition, you're getting this, so you get 2 movies for the price of 1. You can't beat that. Yeah, if you like crime movies, check it out. If you like true crime, check it out. If you just want to see good acting, check it out. Documentary, yeah, 9.5. There's no replayability to it, but it's good. It's really good. That's where it loses a 0.5. I know. It sounds so fucking pretentious, but yeah, I don't know. I'm wary about giving out perfect 10s because they're not everywhere unless they paid for fucking an upgrade. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, 9.5 and a 10. Fucking great double feature. Highly recommend it to anybody. Anyone who's interested in the rise, or more specifically, the fall of John Holmes, check out Wonderland. If you're interested in the golden age of porn and the rise and eventual fall of that whole industry, I'd say check out Boogie Nights. And if you have seen both of those and you want a documentary, or it's date night, or you're trying to impress somebody, show them WAD, because fucking good way to kill 2 hours, and very informative. Very, like, it didn't glamorize John Holmes, and I don't know if there is much to glamorize aside from the fact that he lived a life a lot of teenage boys and a lot of men want to wish that they could live. He just fucked it up so bad that I don't think there's anything to idolize with it. It's very sad. It's very fucking, it's kind of rage inducing sometimes, but it's great. That's great, man. It makes you emote. It's fucking great. Yeah, amazing documentary, amazing movie. I can't praise it high enough. We're almost reaching the 40-minute mark. If you guys like this video, you want to hear more content like that, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Any true crime movies you feel we should check out, either I or the group should check out, drop that down in the comments. Always love to cover a true crime flick. Hopefully going to cover more of the erotic films. I'm hoping at some point to put out a review for Emmanuel in America and then Erotic Nights of the Living Dead. So then I got more stuff on the adult spectrum, but or the XX spectrum, whatever you want to call it. More of that shit coming. So all my friends who love whips, chicks, and porno flicks, you know where to go. More horror reviews coming out. I promised the Atraz video was going to come out today. It's 3 in the morning. We didn't get to actually do the review. We watched the movie, but hopefully that will be out by Saturday. So you gorehounds who are into disturbing movies or anything on the iceberg, stay tuned for that because that will be out real soon. Again, thank you for sticking around for this double review. Who knows, maybe it'll happen again. But until then, I'm going to go burn one. Peace.